Hello and welcome to Hot and Heavy, the Elaine Bennis podcast. I'm your host, Shivani Desai. Today I'll be talking about Season 9, Episode 14, The Strongbox. Happy New Year, everyone! It's so great to be back. I took a couple of weeks off for the holidays, and it felt great. I loved just having a break. It was, just 2.5 weeks at home, and we kind of had a low-key everything, which I was all about that. We didn't travel anywhere. It's not a didn't really travel anywhere. We for sure didn't. We stuck around our town and just did things around Denver, and it was perfect. The kids went back to school this week. And my daughter was actually pretty excited. That's a rarity, but she was like, oh my gosh, I just found her new semester is starting. And so she found out that her best friend's going to be in 3 of her classes. So that really cheered her up. She does not have her class team sports anymore. She had that last semester. So of course, the requirement to take a physical education class, 1 year of physical education. And it's actually, it was not like this when I was growing up, as many things are different because I grew up in the 1900s. But you take physical education, but there are a lot of different options. Like you can just take a weightlifting class, or you can take a specific sport class or whatever. Anyway, so she opted for team sports and she hated every second of it. Well, mostly because there were so many kind of aggro dudes in her class that if she wasn't the best at, say, flag football, they weren't very happy and they weren't very nice about it. And she's like, I'm not athletic. Anyway, so every time she had team sports, she was not a happy camper during the week. But this semester, she's got dance. So she's very excited about that. She's already having a good time after just a couple of classes this week. And anyway, so happy about that. We discovered my son, so he has to wear a uniform to school, and we haven't bought him new pants, uniform pants, in a couple of years. Well, because also the phenomenon, even here in Colorado, where we experience winter and snow and cold, the boys just wear shorts all year round, man. He defends it with, well, I'm wearing a sweatshirt. It's like, well, but you're wearing shorts. Now, in his defense, if the sun is out, which it is 300 days out of the year, brag, even if it's like 30 degrees with the sun out, it feels great. The conception a lot of times is you live in Colorado, it must be snowing all the time, you must be buried in snow. It's like, well, if you're in the mountains, that's more true. But we're in Metro Denver, so it's not like that at all. It's actually pretty mild. If we get snow, it's usually gone within a day or two. Now, I am saying this while looking at my window, and it's totally blizzard conditions right now. So that's a little bit rare. Again, we get our snow. It's not that we don't get snow. But anyway, earlier this week, there was snow, and I told him, I was like, buddy, you cannot wear shorts. It's like fully snowing. And he walks to my car. He walks about like 4 or 5 blocks after school to get to my car. So he comes downstairs, and this poor kid, his pants are so tight. He's like, and they're so short. I'm like, oh my gosh, buddy. I'm like, you don't have any newer pants? He's like, no. And he's like, so uncomfortable. They're just like so tight. I was trying not to laugh, but it was really funny. Right away, and this is a whole other thing. I could probably do an entire podcast about this issue, but where he goes to school, you can only get a certain type of uniform. Like we have to order it from a certain company. And guess what? There's no brick and mortar store, and there's no quick way to get, like in this situation where my son is squeezed into a pair of pants, poor thing, quick turnaround. We need some more pants for him. That just can't happen because we have to order it online. This company is super slow. It's infuriating because Old Navy, Walmart, Target, Amazon, they all sell uniform pants. It's oh my gosh. Okay. Sorry. I need to get off this because I could just go on and on. It's one of my biggest complaints about this damn school. Anyway, All that being said, he wore shorts yesterday because it was not too bad. It was still cold, but it was sunny, and he said he was fine. But woke up this morning, blizzard conditions, a lot of snow, and I'm like, but I'm so sorry. Can you survive? Your pants are on the way. I did get a shipping notification, but like, can you survive? He's like, yeah, it's okay. Luckily, he's not too concerned about like how it looks. Cause I mean, they're like floods. They're flood pants and skin tight. He doesn't care about that they just kind of look funky, but he's just like, they're so uncomfortable. And he likes to play basketball at recess, which they probably won't today anyway. But at any rate, that's enough about my son's pants and the drama about his pants. He's basically Kramer. They're painted on. I didn't even make that connection until just now. See, I'm a little rusty, guys. I've been off for 2 weeks. All right. So with that being said, let's get into this episode. The synopsis for the Strongbox is as follows. Kramer stores all his valuables in a Strongbox, but is unable to find the perfect hiding place for the key. George's girlfriend refuses to accept George's breakup. Elaine's mysterious new boyfriend turns out to be married and poor. Jerry refuses to open the door for a neighbor he doesn't recognize, so Kramer becomes the guy's friend out of guilt. This episode was written by Dan O'Keefe and Billy Kimball. All right, we start out the episode in George's apartment. George's girlfriend Maura brings him a cup of coffee and, he tries to break up with her. She takes a beat and then denies the breakup. She clarifies that they're not breaking up. George just looks at her and takes that in. Finally just says, all right. The actress in this scene is Alex Kapp. She plays Maura. She's also appeared in Party of Five, Jag, and was a series regular with our JLD in New Adventures of Old Christine. Apparently, she gained a bit of notoriety. I thought this was interesting, a little bit of a fun fact. I don't know if you want to say fun, but in the 80s, because she was the girlfriend of Robert Chambers, who was also known as the Preppy Killer. So she was dating a murderer, like Elaine thought she was with Joel Rifkin. There's so many things in common. I really like her. I think she's the perfect amount of infuriating in this episode. She's a really good actress. Everything from denying the breakups to talking to food. Alex Kapp plays it very well, and I absolutely love her. I think she's very funny. All right, next we're in Monks. Jerry is baffled by this breakup refusal. He's like, what did you do? What could I do? We messed around and went to a movie. Then Jerry explains, both parties don't have to agree to a breakup. It's not like launching a missile from a submarine where two of you have to turn your keys at the same time. He says you probably just didn't make a convincing argument. Like, let me hear your case. And George lays it out. I don't like her. I don't find her attractive. And I'd like to sleep with a lot of other women. Oh, and she also talks to her food. Oh, Mr. Mashed Potatoes, you are so good. Jerry declares he has an airtight case. But then Jerry cuts him off when George gets to the bedroom complaints. That's a great moment. I'm afraid we're out of time. Jerry then shows George some cufflinks that he got from an auction. They belong to Jerry Lewis, who's going to be at this Friars Club roast where Jerry will be. And now Jerry's like, I have an in to talk to him. George scoffs. He says, you already had an in. You have the same name. Jerry! Oh, yeah, that'll intrigue him, Jerry says. Well, it worked when I met George Papard last week. George Papard has been dead for years. This is one of my favorite lines. Well, whoever it was, he knew a lot about the A-Team. I love George Papard, by the way. Random fact. I always thought he was so funny on the A-Team. All right, next we're in a coffee shop. A different coffee shop, and Elaine is sitting with a man, and she's discussing which last meal she would have on death row, and that it would depend on the style of execution. Elaine says the chair would warrant something hot and spicy, lethal injection, maybe a light pasta. Well, he would really like to get together with Elaine, and she says, oh yeah, how about you give me your phone number? And he says, well, you probably should give me yours. Okay. Would you like to grab lunch sometime? Do you work around here? Not really. Is there anything you can tell me about yourself? She asks him. Well, I think you're very beautiful. Oh, that'll do. My take on the scene, we get our flirty Elaine. I think the conversation is fun, the whole last meal, depending on the method of execution. Now, I've definitely thought about what my last meal would be. This is somehow something that comes up a lot in conversation, like one of those would you rathers or, those kind of discussion topics that come up and you're doing an icebreaker or something. Especially when I have to do some of these auditions, a lot of times they'll be like, tell us your name, your height, where you live, and something interesting about yourself, or something like this, like, what would your last meal be? What's your favorite food? Anyway, so I've thought about this, but never in this way in relation to if I was getting executed. But anyway, I vacillated between like 5 of my favorites, like a super creamy pasta dish, pani puri, which is an Indian street food. Pani puri is like, I literally just had to swallow because my mouth filled with saliva thinking about pani puri. I'm telling you, it's so incredibly good. What else? Sushi. Oh my gosh. I love sushi. A big like saucy burrito. Like there's so many things. I can't make a decision. Hopefully I'll never have to make this type of decision about my last death row meal, but I don't plan on being on death row. Anyway, back to the scene. Now, I acknowledge this is probably my reaction to this scene is probably because I've been listening to a lot of Crime Junkie. I'm basically binging that podcast. It's a true crime podcast. I highly recommend it. But this scene, it's like, red flags, Elaine, red flags. No, don't even date this guy. He's a weirdo. But putting that aside, it's a cute scene. I love that Elaine just brushes off how secretive he is because he calls her beautiful. It's all it takes, which is evident of an increasingly desperate Elaine. I mean, our girl it's just getting worse and worse, her desperation as we move through this series. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. Jerry asks Elaine about Putty. What about him? Well, we haven't talked in 3 weeks. I think it's over. Elaine tells Jerry how mysterious this new guy is. He won't even tell me his phone number or where he works. I bet he's in a relationship. Or, Jerry says, he's a crime fighter protecting his secret identity. Elaine, you could be dating the Green Lantern. Which one is he? Green suit, power ring. Oh, no. Elaine does not care for jewelry on men. Kramer enters. He says there was another robbery in the building, and he's got this big box with them. You bought a cooler? No, it's a Strongbox to protect his irreplaceables. And what would those be? Elaine asks, very condescendingly. He says some family heirloom taxidermy, his Tony, military discharge papers. You were in the army? Briefly. He needs to hide his key in a good place because if someone finds it, they hold the key to all his possessions. Elaine says, yeah, literally. And this deeply offends Kramer. Literally? What's that supposed to mean? He asks Jerry if he can hide the key in his place, and Jerry's like, yeah, no problem. And then Kramer signals with some gibberish to Jerry that he has to leave. He needs some privacy. Oh, come on. It's a security issue. Jerry and Elaine go into the hallway, and Elaine thinks, oh, what if he's married? Kramer? No, the Green Lantern. Kramer calls them back in, and Jerry asks Elaine, you would date a married guy? That's so hacky. Elaine argues, hey, look, I may never get married. This could be the closest I'd get. Jerry opens his utensil drawer and finds the key. You peeked! Kramer's so mad. This is your hiding place? Well, I put it under a spoon. My take on this scene, I love it. It's a great touch that right off the bat, we address the Putty issue. We're never quite sure as viewers. Is she with Putty? Is she not? I just love the delivery too, where JLD's like, I think it's over. This is such a fucked up relationship, but I still stand by it. It's the best one for Elaine. They are meant for each other. We get a lot of info about Elaine's plot here. Why Glenn is so mysterious, of course. Juvenile Jerry thinks it's because he's the Green Lantern. Elaine's a little bit more realistic with a possible affair. And her rationale for dating a married guy, I mean, how far we've come with Elaine. I mean, early seasons Elaine would have never even considered dating a married guy. But now she's like, fuck it. This is the closest I might get. That little moment with Kramer always cracks me up that he just totally misunderstands her use of literally, like he thinks it's an insult. It's just, again, these little moments that don't go anywhere or really, have much to do with the plot. It's just character building. And that's why I love it so much. Like, okay, apparently Kramer doesn't like the term literally. All right. It reminds me of a future episode in the Puerto Rican Day Parade where she says, vaya con Dios. And he's like, con Dios? That's rude. It's like it just comes out of nowhere. But again, it just adds all the sprinkling of flavor to the show. And that's what makes a show fantastic. Great character development. All right, next we are in George's apartment. George is wrapping up a presentation, very formal presentation to Maura about why they are now broken up. But she still refuses. And she says how, they both have to want this breakup in order for it to happen. It's like launching missiles from a submarine. We both have to turn our keys. Well, George says, I'm going to have to ask you to turn your key. I'm afraid I can't do that. Turn your key. We get a great George yell. Turn your key, Maura. Turn your key. Next, we're on the street. Elaine and her dude are walking, and she asks him how a guy like him isn't involved. Well, I might ask you the same thing. Then we hear Elaine's voiceover. She says, that's true. Maybe he's not married. Then he hands her a flower. Oh, that's so sweet. And we hear her thought, how long do I have to hold this? And then Glenn sees a woman walking towards them, and he's like, oh no. And he ushers Elaine quickly into an alley and says, I know a shortcut. And he bolts down the alley. We hear Elaine's voiceover say, married. That's it. I'm chucking the flower. My take, always enjoy the voiceover. Very effective. I think that's a really good device that they use. I would totally be the same way about that flower, by the way. I can appreciate flowers. But honestly, it's not even in like my top 10 choices for a gift. It's just not. I can appreciate how beautiful some of them are. My dear husband has gotten me flowers before. And I will say the arrangements he gets are great. They're not too big, because that's another thing. I'm like, I don't want like a big thing of anyway, it's very complicated, but I would have been the same way. This is once again moving the story along here. Glenn freaking out about seeing a woman on the street and then rushing out of sight. I love the chucking the flower. Nice touch at the end. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. Elaine is on the street and calling up to his window. He pops his head out and asks what she's doing down there. You didn't hear me buzzing? Oh, it must be broken, he says. She asks him to throw down his key, but Jerry doesn't trust her. And Elaine does admit, it probably would bounce and go into the sewer. She's confident at first, but then she's like, nah, you're right. She asks him to keep her company until someone comes out. Jerry then shares some very boring information about how he can no longer have a huge meal and go right to sleep. Well, speaking of going to sleep, Elaine says, nodding off. Not interested in that at all. She tells Jerry how he's definitely an adulterer, Glenn, and that he's cheating on his wife with me. A man walks by just looking at Elaine, and she says, we haven't done anything yet. I'm hungry. Can you throw something down? Jerry throws her, I recognize it, a blueberry Nutri-Grain bar. It just brings back so many memories. We would have Nutri-Grain bars in our pantry growing up on the regular, except we would get strawberry. Anyway, he says he's going to go try and fix the buzzer, and we hear her say about the Nutri-Grain bar, it went in the sewer. He takes the plate off of his intercom as Kramer enters, and Kramer's like, what are you doing? And he finds his Strongbox key in there. You jammed your key in here and shorted out my intercom. Well, Kramer is so pissed. You had to go looking for it. You're so obsessed with me. You have to know everything that I'm doing. Jerry's like, whatever, I'm going to go get Elaine in. Oh, what are you doing with her? This is one of those fantastic moments where it's like the immediate payoff. You set it up and then you knock it down with a great punchline. Jerry walks out and Kramer shuts his door on him. Security issue. Well, Elaine already got in. She flirted with the menu guy and hands Jerry a stack of menus. So he's definitely married, huh? Man, I would have loved to have been there when you told him off. Elaine sort of awkwardly coughs. Oh, come on. She says, well, he could be a superhero. You should have seen him run. Kramer lets them back in and challenges Jerry not to treat his key like some Easter egg hunt. We hear George from the street, and Jerry tells him he'll come right down. He puts on his coat and then finds the key in his pocket of the coat. I believe this belongs to you. Hey! Kramer is so mad once again. My take, we're moving Jerry's story along here with the intercom. And this back and forth from the street to his apartment is very fun. I like that whole visual. Elaine, knowing her limitations with catching the key, that's a great moment. I really like how she's like, I'll catch it. Oh, it'll bounce in the sewer. Yeah, you're right. Also, she has no shame in admitting that she's seeing an adulterer. And the whole, we haven't done anything yet to the guy is fantastic. Nice touch that the Nutri-Grain bar bounces into the sewer. Again, we're getting a lot of these like setups and then punchline, setup and then punchline, which I know if you've been listening for a long time or you know a lot about the show, that structure wasn't really how the show started out. It was so conversational. It was about kind of digging into these issues that like kind of everyday issues, again, the show about nothing, and really finding the humor in regular conversation. Of course, a little elevated. Not everyone has funny conversations, but now we're in this era of the show where it's a little bit quicker. The scenes are quicker. The laughs are a little bit quicker, but I don't know. I'm not mad at it because when she says, "It went in the sewer," and Jerry's like, "Oh my God," it cracks me up. They do still have some classic Seinfeld moments, but once Larry David left the show, I do feel like they got into a little bit more of the traditional sitcom setup of the setup punchline in quicker succession, but it has that Seinfeld flavor to it, so it doesn't feel so cheesy like it would in like sorry, but Everybody Loves Raymond or even a Friends. I love Friends, but it's that same kind of structure. Anyway, back to the scene. JLD always delivers with that awkward reaction. I always love an awkward Elaine moment, and it's no exception here when Jerry assumes that she told off Glenn for cheating on his wife, but she's still holding out hope that he's a superhero. But that awkward like thing. And that's all JLD. She does that so well. Every show you watch with her, holy shit. I mean, we always rewatch episodes of Veep pretty regularly, at least 4 or 5 times a week. And Selena Meyer is equal parts just absolute lethal bitch, and then also dealing with such awkward, uncomfortable conversations and issues and moments. It's all done with perfection from JLD. No surprise there. And I have to call it out. Desperate Elaine. You deserve better than Glenn. All right, next we're in the lobby. Jerry lets George in, and he's eating the blueberry Nutri-Grain bar that Jerry threw to Elaine and fell in the sewer. Another guy is about to enter the building, but Jerry says, "I'm sorry, I can't let you in. I don't know you." The guy's like, "What are you talking about? I live here. I just went out to get some bird seed and I forgot my key." George thinks that sounds like a scam. Jerry apologizes and shuts the door on him. George excitedly tells Jerry while they're waiting for the elevator that he broke up with Maura. It's done. Great, you're lonely and miserable again. Feels right. Jerry asks George, "Is that guy still there?" He's staring at us. The guy's just standing there looking through the door window, just can't believe what Jerry just did. Jerry says, "Don't look at him." And he starts pounding on the door. We don't hear that. They get in the elevator. And George offers a bite of the sewer Nutri-Grain bar to Jerry, and he's like, no. Next, we're in George's apartment. He's relaxing on the couch, and we hear a George voiceover contemplating the ginger ale at the coffee shop. Is it just Coke and Sprite mixed together? How can I prove it? I can't. There's a knock on the door, and it's Maura. "Hi, honey," and she enters his apartment. George is so confused as to why she's there. He says, I ended this relationship twice. "Oh, George, you didn't mean that. That was just a fight." "Why does it feel like I'm the only one working at this breakup?" he asks. And she says that, "I listened to your arguments, but they were rambling and flimsy. I'm not convinced. Now go get dressed and we'll get some dinner." George relents. All right. And as George is walking away, she picks up an apple from the table and says, "Ew, Mr. Apple, you have a brown spot." That is something I say on I'm not even kidding you, at least 4 times a week. I like to keep apples in the house. I'm very much a believer in an apple a day keeps the doctor away, but I also use them in my smoothies. So in a bag of apples, you're going to get a few with brown spots, which I do just cut off and eat the rest of the apple. I don't waste food. Okay, moving on. Next, we're in Glenn's apartment. Elaine says, "Oh, so this is your little love den." "Oh, it's nothing special, just a place I keep." Now, it's a pretty dingy apartment. He offers to light a fire in the fireplace. I'm having some problems with the heat. So he goes out the window to get some firewood, and there's a voiceover from Elaine. You know, she definitely thinks this is some secret place he's keeping away from his wife. And so she's like, oh, this is wrong. I should go. There's a knock at the door, and Glenn asks her to get it, which I never understand that. That happens in sitcoms all the time. It's just to set up a joke. But I'm like, why would you have someone else answer your door? Anyway, she opens it, and the woman from the street is there. She asks, where's Glenn? Elaine apologizes profusely. She's like, oh, you're the woman from the street. I'm not really a homewrecker. I thought he was a superhero. Lady, I'm not his wife. I'm his welfare caseworker. Is he home? This is his home. Elaine looks around. Elaine figures it out. He's not married. And the caseworker fills in the blank. Poor. Glenn enters with an old chair. I think this'll burn. The actress in this scene is Mary Shear. She plays the welfare caseworker, Miss Smoth, apparently. Now, I've actually covered her before. I didn't realize it at the time, but she's appeared before on Seinfeld. She was in the episode The Kiss Hello, and she was one of the ladies in Jerry's building who kept kissing him that he hated. And her hair is a lot shorter in that episode. She's the one that's like, that just keeps incessantly asking him questions. How are you? You're good, not great. Like, she's really good. Anyway, Mary Shear has quite a resume in comedy. She is a Groundlings legend. She was one of the original cast members in Mad TV and also in many Nickelodeon shows. And she's got a small role here, but I do love the delivery of poor. Like, she knows exactly what Elaine is thinking. It's really well done, and it's perfect. All right, my take on the scene. So we do get to see some regret here from Elaine with that voiceover, thinking she's in this dingy apartment because it's some side place he has as his secret love den, away from the wife and everything. So I do like that we see Elaine going like, I shouldn't be doing this. So we move the story along here. We find out Glenn is poor, which presents a whole other dilemma for Elaine. Next, we're in Jerry's building. Start out in the elevator. The neighbor who Jerry refused to let in the building gets in. Ooh, Jerry figures it out. So you do live here. Yeah. Then they proceed to get off at the same floor. And turns out he lives right next to Kramer. Oh, so you live right there. Yeah. Jerry feels pretty bad. Next, we're in Monk's. Elaine is telling Jerry how Glenn couldn't give her his phone number because he doesn't have a phone. He's not married, he's poor, and sticks a Tootsie Pop in her mouth. Is he wretchedly poor? Jerry asks. Does he wear one of those barrels with the straps? She says he probably busted it up to use for heat. So when are you giving Boxcar Willie his walking papers? Well, Elaine feels bad to end it over money. Jerry asks if she's dealt with the poor in any other situation. Yeah, there was this homeless guy who used to urinate on our garbage cans. All right, Jerry's like, well, what did you do? Well, we gave him a few bucks and now he goes across the street. Well, there you go, Jerry says. Elaine initially rejects this idea. What? I can't pay him off to get out of this relationship. What am I supposed to do? Walk into his hovel and offer him? Well, how much do you think it would be? George enters, tells them how he's still seeing Maura because he was unable to break up beyond a reasonable doubt. Elaine is so bummed. She says if only he could have been cheating on his wife, it would have been so much simpler. Who is this, Blue Arrow? No, Green Lantern, she tells George. Then Jerry starts bebopping and scatting with all sorts of poor superhero puns. He says his superpower was a lack of money. He's invulnerable to creditors. He's the got no Green Lantern. Elaine's like, okay, I can't take this. She gets up to leave. But George stops her. He has one. Hey, Elaine, maybe his girlfriend is Lois Lone. Elaine fake laughs. Well crafted. And she exits. George decides to try the cheating thing to get out of his relationship with Maura. But since she's like a DA, he's like, I have to really do it. Otherwise, I'll crumble under the cross. Great line. He chooses this woman in the office who's always had a thing for him, but he's never pursued it before because, she's too tan. It's the middle of winter. She's like a carrot. Elaine enters again looking for her glasses, and Jerry attacks her with another pun. He can wipe out his checking account with a single bounce. Keep it, she says, and exits again. My take on this scene, right off the bat, this scene always makes me want a Tootsie Pop. I mean, I can feel the little micro cuts in my mouth and everything. That's so worth it because of the center Tootsie. It's so good. Elaine wants out. I mean, and she does feel bad, but Poor doesn't work for Elaine, and that's okay. I mean, sure, this makes her look shallow, but for her, this is just not going to work. And it's Elaine. And it's in this Seinfeld. Everyone's shallow on this show. And also, we've seen that it's not like she has to date rich guys. Putty certainly isn't rich, but a guy on welfare, I mean, that's a whole different situation. It's not for our Lainey, and I get it. I'm not sure I could do the same thing either. Again, a guy doesn't need to be rolling in it, but that's a whole slew of issues if a guy is on welfare. I'm not going to get too much into that, but I support Elaine's decision. And Elaine contemplating the amount of money it would take. How much do you think it would be? I love that delivery. I love all the pun interaction with Jerry and George. It's very fun. And when she says to George, well crafted. Oh, I love that so much. I also use that very often in my life when someone is a little bit too proud of a dumbass joke that they've made. And yes, it's mostly said to my husband. It's very amusing how Jerry and George are so proud of themselves. They're so excited about all these puns. And it's basically like they're teasing their little sister, and it's delightful to watch. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. Jerry enters and tells Kramer how there's a giant bird in the hallway. And Kramer explains, yeah, it belongs to Phil, the neighbor you turned against. He says, I told him it would be fine if he wanted to have his bird stretch his wings in the hallway. And he did that to try and smooth things over since Jerry was playing God with the front door. He's like, in fact, I was hanging out at his place and I hid the key over there to the Strongbox. Oh, he let you? Jerry asks. No, he doesn't know. So he won't be compulsively looking for it like some people. You. Kramer exits and we hear loud bird noises and Kramer screaming. He comes back in, checking his head and face for blood. Got attacked by the bird. All right, next we're in George's apartment. George enters with Loretta, the woman from the office who has a crush on him. And he's trying to clarify why she's so tan. You've been in the city all winter? Well, I was in Maine for a couple days. She tells George she's always fantasized about jumping into bed with him. Ha-ha! George is excited and motions towards the bedroom. But then she pulls back, informs him that she wants to build something with him and not sleep with him right away. And she won't take no for an answer. George is like, are you sure? It could really get me out of a jam. But once again, he gives a dejected, all right. And now he's in 2 relationships. The actress in this scene is Illeana Douglas, and she plays 2-tan Loretta. Probably best known for her roles in To Die For, Cape Fear, and 6 Feet Under. And she has a long resume. My goodness, she's been in a lot. In fact, she was in really big things before her appearance on Seinfeld. I remember being a little bit surprised that she has a small role. I mean, granted, it's on the biggest show on television at the time, but I remember seeing her and being like, oh, I thought she was more in the movies. You know, back then it was more separate, movie stars and TV stars. But anyway, fun fact, she dated Martin Scorsese for 9 years. I like her a lot. I always love her performances whenever I see her in anything. I've also been told that I look like Illeana Douglas a few times. I'm not sure if I love that, but hey, you know what? She's a great actress. She does a great job. I love her performance as Loretta. And just side note, like obviously she goes to a tanning booth, George. It is possible to be too tan even if you are in New York City in the winter. They're called tanning booths. Ask Kramer about it. Jeez. Next, we're in an alley. Elaine and Glenn are standing there. She's like, well, what are we doing here? He tells her it's a surprise. Then a guy comes out and throws out a garbage bag into a bin. And Glenn starts going through it. And Elaine is horrified. What are you doing? He's like, it's a bag of donuts. It's garbage. No. He says they put the old ones out here when they make the new ones. All right, that's enough for Elaine. She takes out her checkbook to pay him off. How do you spell your last name? Glenn exclaims, there's a bear claw in the bag. You have no idea how rare this is. Elaine's like, I'll just make it out to cash. How's $300? But then Glenn tells Elaine that she is the bear claw in the garbage bag of his life. And that changes everything. Elaine is totally charmed, even after getting splashed by a bucket of mop water being thrown out. My take. Oh, desperate Elaine. A lame-ass line melts her heart and she eats a garbage bear claw? No, come on. I suppose this is a little glimpse into the old sympathetic Elaine mixed with desperate Elaine. Either way, I'm not a fan. The Elaine I know would not pull a Costanza and eat out of the garbage no matter how quote unquote romantic a line may be. No, I'm not in support of this at all. All right, next we're in Phil's apartment. Jerry comes to the door and informs Phil that his bird, which is lovely, by the way, made a mess on my door. And Phil says, well, I thought you might clean it up, or you or your maid there, motioning to the woman in the apartment. That's my wife. Yikes. Jerry nods. Okay, I think we're done here. The actress in this scene is Rosie Malik Yonan. She plays Phil's wife. She's also appeared in Beverly Hills 90210, Chicago Hope, and The Young and the Restless. She's also done quite a bit, in fact, most of her career recently, in radio and podcasting, as well as narrating audiobooks. So not much of a role here in this episode, but great face acting and crying at the end. All right, next we're in Jerry's apartment. Jerry is recapping George's situation, that he's in a relationship with a woman you don't like, and you're having an affair with a woman who won't have sex with you. Jerry's all dressed up for the roast, but he can't find his Jerry Lewis cufflinks. George again argues he doesn't need them. You have the same name. Jerry! George has to go. He's going ice skating with one and going to a staged reading of Godspell with the other. Which is with who? It doesn't matter. George exits. Kramer enters in a tux and compliments Jerry. Oh, you clean up nice. Jerry's like, I can't find my cufflinks. Kramer knew it. He knew he would lose them, so he put it in his Strongbox. We'll just go to Phil's and get the key. As they approach, Phil and his wife are arriving in tears. Their bird, Fredo, died, and the vet thinks he was poisoned, something in his food. He kind of implies it was Jerry, and they exit back into their place. Jerry's appalled. Kramer, they think I killed Fredo. Kramer says, it's weird that bird died, because he hid the key in his food dish. Oh, Jerry's like, you killed Fredo. Well, Kramer totally victim blames, and he's like, well, he was stupid. He shouldn't have eaten the key. Well, Jerry needs the cufflinks, but the key is in the bird. What are we going to do? Well, you've answered your own question. I'll get the shovel. Next, we're at Monk's. George is with Tan Loretta having some lunch, and he says the actor who played Jesus made some odd choices. She's so confused. What? I had fun ice skating. Maura enters. Oh my God, George freaks out. She's like, what? You told me to meet you here for lunch. George puts on a big dramatic performance. My serious girlfriend and my torrid affair. This is all blowing up in my face. I have ruined 3 lives. I'll understand if you never want to see me again. No, they both say they want to continue their relationship with George. So this still isn't over? Maura says no. You? No, Loretta says. All right. Next, we're in Glenn's apartment. Elaine has bought him a bunch of really nice things, some furniture, TV, stereo, and a cord of wood so he won't burn the furniture for the heat. A woman walks in and Glenn says, oh, Allison, you're home early. Who is this? Elaine asks. The woman looks at Elaine and says, his wife. So you're poor and married. Looks like it, Glenn says. And then the wife asks, who the hell are you? Elaine says, I guess I'm Lois Lone. The actress in this scene who plays Allison is Bonnie McNeil. She's also appeared in Beverly Hills 90210, The X-Files, and hosts a podcast called Sticks. I think she does a good job as Allison, a lot of sauce on the lines she has, as it would be, catching your husband with another woman. I do like how she says, his wife. She does it perfectly. My take on this scene, I think this is a nice wrap up to her plot, that he's poor and married. So it seems like, just being poor, not a deal breaker. Just being married, no, not necessarily a deal breaker, but both together, she can't deal with that. I do love the callback to Lois Lone. That's a great way to end the scene. All right, next we're in the pet cemetery. Jerry and Kramer find Fredo's grave. Jerry agrees to dig it up so that he doesn't have to get the key out of the bird. Kramer exits to find Lassie number 3's grave. Phil and his wife are walking to the grave. She needs to say goodbye once again. She's in such grief. And they see Jerry as he's saying, I dug up Fredo. Now let's cut him open. They look at him in shock. Oh my God. Jerry sees them and freezes. Hello, neighbor. There's a tag to the episode. They're in Jerry's apartment. George is counting out some money on the table. He says $55 to each of them to break up. Turns to Elaine. What do you think? Give me 40 and you'll never see me again. Elaine asks Jerry what he's going to do now after the Phil debacle at the pet cemetery. Are you going to live here? Are you going to move out? He's like, I'll just take the fire escape to get out of the building. George gets up and asks what's in the cooler, and he opens the Strongbox lid. Jerry and Kramer gasp. Well, look at that. I guess I forgot to lock it. It was open. Jerry's so pissed. We desecrated a pet cemetery for nothing. Oh, this is really one for the books, Jerry, Kramer says. My take, we get a yummy little Benestanza moment here. The physicality of Elaine smacking her tongue after saying her line about giving me $40. It's brilliant. Also brilliant, the randomness of $55 per woman. Now, maybe Loretta would take it, but I'm not betting Maura will accept $55. I don't know. She cannot quit George for whatever reason. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break, and I will see you on the other side. The big day is coming. Whether it's in a few decades or a few days, it's never the wrong time to start planning. Admit it, you've had the big day on your mind ever since you knew it was coming, and you want it to be perfect. After all, it's not every day someone gets executed. And that's where we come in. Introducing Dead Man Dining. We are a premier catering service that designs the perfect last meal before you head down the hallway in chains. Dead Man Dining will visit your maximum security cell personally to discuss the ideal plate for the big day. Can't make a decision? No problem. We will also give you suggestions based on the method of execution and subsequent cleanup once you're worm food. From leg of lamb to a bowl of cornflakes, we have provided over 200 heinous criminals with a myriad of dining experiences that were, well, maybe delicious, but there's no way to know because they can't exactly leave a review, right? Dead Man Dining. Capital nourishment. And we're back. In the notes about nothing, they mentioned something that I thought was pretty funny. There was some deleted dialogue where Elaine calls Jerry out for going to meet George on the street to let him in when he didn't do that for her. He just talked to her from the window. So when Jerry says, I'm going to go let George in, she calls him out. She's like, hey, you didn't do that for me. And Jerry says, George can't be alone on the street for very long. And then we hear George from the window saying, watch it, old man. I thought that was actually really funny. Like, George just waiting on a street is not a good thing. I have to go let him in. And then something I found on the IMDb page for this episode. I thought this was a fun fact and something that I didn't know, so I thought I would share it with my dear listeners. Coke and Sprite mixed together is known as bartender ginger ale, and it's a technique used when the bar is out of ginger ale. I just thought that was interesting. Also, a goof that was pointed out, why the hell is Kramer going to the Friars Club roast? Like, he would never be invited to that. It makes no sense. All right, let's move on to Greg's Sack Lunch. Greg is our most dedicated contributor, and every week he sends us a sack full of his thoughts. So let's go ahead and open Greg's sack. He says, I want to start out by saying Happy New Year to you, Shivani, and to all of your listeners. This is a great episode and one I sort of forget about. I love both George and Elaine's stories in this one, and Kramer and Jerry get such great stuff too. This might be my favorite one of the last season. Okay. I just literally, my eyes just got really big. I'm a little surprised to hear that, but I love it, Greg. This is why you're a perfect contributor, because we're not always on the same page. I'll get more into that in a little bit, but Happy New Year to you as well, Greg. I wish you all the best for 2025. We only have a handful more episodes for your sack, so I don't want to think about that right now because it makes me sad. But thank you for the wishes, and it's January 9th, so I'm totally allowed to wish you Happy New Year. I think it's still within the range that's acceptable. Next in Greg's sack, I find his favorite scenes and Elaine moments. He says, Elaine gets so many great lines in this one, it's almost impossible to pick my favorites. I love when the Green Lantern gives her the flower and she mentally says, how long do I have to hold on to this thing? I know, it's great. Like I said, the voiceovers never disappoint, and I'm so on the same page. I would not want to hold on to a dang flower all day. Next, he says, my favorite line in this episode and one of my favorites of the entire series is when Jerry says to Elaine, so when are you giving Boxcar Willie his walking papers? The dynamic of a poor guy being someone not worth dating is something you don't see often. The poor are like a protected group not to be punched down to, and that's why I love this dynamic for Elaine. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you said that, Greg, because like I said earlier, I do agree with Elaine not being able to date a poor guy. And let's also remember a guy that doesn't even have a phone and he's on welfare. So it's like, this is a totally different level of just having someone who's low income, right? Because as I pointed out, she dates a mechanic. Putty's not exactly a rich guy. But to your point, Greg, I do think this isn't something you see very often. And in true Seinfeld fashion, like this is the character, right? The reasons for breaking up or the reasons for not liking someone, I mean, just run the gamut. But I do agree with you. It's not something you see very often. I think they handle it well. I think it's a really funny dynamic and it makes sense for Elaine. Greg goes on to say the scene at the diner where Elaine and Jerry are talking about how she can break up with the Green Lantern just cracks me up. I love when she uses the word hovel and the part where George calls her Lois Lone and she responds, well crafted. I could watch an hour of these poor jokes. I know it's not politically correct to make fun of poor people, but the writing here is just too funny. Exactly. And here we go again. I'm going to defend something that I'm sure a lot of people are like, this should never happen. But here's the thing. We're on Seinfeld. Let's remember, it's Seinfeld. And for me, it's not so much that they're punching down to a poor person. It's just Jerry and George being such immature idiots and being amused by making puns like that. And it shows how dumb they are and just how like, wow, they're getting this much pleasure out of making such stupid jokes. And they are funny and they are, like, and I guess Elaine here, she just leaves, right? It's like she does have the role of being like, all right, I don't have time for this. All right, I don't want to deal with this. And it's not because she's offended they're making fun of her boyfriend. It's more just like, you know what? I'm not in the mood. Like I'm not in the mood for these jokes. And to me, again, it's like, I was just talking about this to a friend of mine where some of the issues that Seinfeld tackles, I guess, like the gay thing, right? Not that there's anything wrong with that. That whole episode, it's more a spotlight on George's insecurity about his masculinity versus being insulted that they might be perceived as gay. It's a very subtle difference, but it's imperative to have it not be a punching down type of humor and more about like a commentary and a humorous side of how insecure men can be. And here, I think it's the same thing with this moment of them making jokes. I don't look at it as punching down. I just see, oh my God, Jerry sees an opportunity to make a bunch of stupid puns. And that's all it's about. It's really about that. It really isn't to insult Glenn. It's just so that they can have these funny moments. Next, Greg says, the last scene of all four in Jerry's apartment is also a great one. I love how Elaine tells George that if he gives her $40, he'll never see her again. And that mouth gesture she does while she's staring him dead in the eye just takes the cake. George has no response. When they give these two separate stories, we miss out, but they know to give us at least one or two tasty moments between them. Oh my gosh, we are so on the same page. I think I called it a yummy Benestanza moment or a delicious one, whatever. I can't even remember what I said 3 minutes ago, but yes, I agree. That moment is so fantastic. And yeah, it's that look in her eye, that little lip movement. It's just mwah, mwah, chef's kiss. Now, yes, their storylines are separate, and I always do wish they would dovetail them a little more, especially for Benestanza, so we can have some more moments, at least to get thoughts on each other's situations. I don't know. I feel like there could have been a snarky moment from Elaine being like, she won't break up with you. Like, why would she want to continue to be in a relationship with you? All right, next in Greg's sack is his scene swap idea, which he says, I don't think there's anything I would cut out. It all makes me laugh. And finally, in Greg's sack are his other thoughts. He says, the casting of the guest stars in this episode was so well done. Ileana Douglas, super tan here, and Alex Kapp are hilarious as George's girlfriends. Alex Kapp must have made an impression because I remember her being on JLD's later show, The New Adventures of Old Christine. I also love the actor who plays the neighbor Phil, especially from his later work as a regular on Mike and Molly. Wow, you are so well versed on all these actors. Agreed. Yeah, they're all great. I didn't really talk about Phil, but he's fantastic too. He's got that like hangdog expression that's so, it works so well in so many situations. I am contemplating a not Mike and Molly, New Adventures of Old Christine watch, a binge, just because it's JLD and I feel like I should watch it. She won a bunch of awards for it. I know my parents loved it. But yeah, I never got into that. But yeah, I would be excited to see Alex Kapp. There were a bunch of pictures, like still shots on her IMDb page from that show. She was also in an episode of Friends where she was really funny too. She was one of the women contemplating whether or not they would date Ross. It was in Central Perk, given that he would be divorced 3 times. Thank you so much, Greg. The first sack of 2025. I so appreciate, again, all the work that you do for this podcast. It would not be the same without you. And now it's time to close Greg's sack lunch. All right, moving on to my favorite Elaine moments. Well, I just talked about it. The tag. I don't know if I've ever had a favorite Elaine moment that was in the tag, but it's the $40 you'll never see me again with the tongue click at the end. It's so good. And Greg pointed out another great part of that. It's that look in her eye, just staring right at him, like staring through him almost. It makes it all the better. All physicality, all fantastic. Close second, I do love the moment where she says, he's poor, and puts the Tootsie Pop in her mouth. Lots of mouth acting here for JLD, and I'm all about it. She has a beautiful mouth. That's creepy, but I stand by it. And my final notes for the episode. I feel like this is a very middle of the road episode for me. It's not super funny, but it's not bad at the same time. I feel like we're in this mid-season slump. I mean, I guess we're technically a little bit past the mid-season, but I guess I've heard this mentioned before, and it's actually in an episode of Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee between Jerry and Tina Fey. And they were talking about just the grind of making like 22, 23 episode sitcoms for network, right? Like just the grind of it. And they were saying how the mid-season, like, and they kind of called out like like after the holidays, like into the new year, it's the part of the season where they're just exhausted and trying to get through. They're just trying to churn through this part before they get to sweeps. And so it was just like an interesting conversation that I had never thought about, but they both could relate to that, obviously, because they were both, obviously stars of their own show and writers on their show. I do love the concept and the issues it brings up of dating a poor person. And I so love that they gave this to Elaine. It wouldn't have been as funny with the guys dating a poor woman. And let's face it, Jerry and George wouldn't care if she was on welfare as long as she was hot. And Kramer wouldn't care either. But with him, I could see him like maybe having her move in with him or something. And then there would be hilarity that would ensue with that. The dynamic of an independent, career-minded woman in the 90s, who at this point, now Elaine's pretty successful, dating a guy on welfare, it's interesting. And I don't know, a little tweak I would have done. I would have loved to have a little more substance with the plot, like maybe becoming a sort of sugar mama out of guilt. Like she feels a little guilty because she has money. So I just think that might have been more interesting. We don't get it till the very end of her plot where she's bought him all this stuff for his hovel. But maybe bringing that in, like shifting that a little earlier and then giving Glenn some more personality. Maybe there's other quirks. And again, nothing to punch down that he's poor, but maybe some other kind of issues come up. Maybe even though she's buying him groceries, he still eats out of garbage cans. And like, that's the issue in their relationship or something. Like I could leave it to Seinfeld to make it funny. There's some potential there. I'm not the writer, but then of course he's married to. Keep that in the plot because I think that is actually really funny. All right. I think that's all I can say about the Strongbox. We're in single digits, folks. After this episode, 8 more to go. Let the countdown begin. Can't believe it. It's happening. Please be sure to follow the podcast on social media. On Instagram, it's at Hot Heavy Elaine. On TikTok, it's at Elaine Bennis Podcast. And if you want to email me, please do at elainepodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.